There's something about London at night. When the rain falls softly and the city quiets down, you start to feel the weight of its history. Every street, every cobblestone, it carries echoes of the lives that came before us, some filled with laughter and music, and others with screams that still linger long after death. People say ghosts are just memories trapped in time, but in London, those memories whisper back. And tonight I want to tell you about 3 places where the veil between the living and the dead is paper thin. Let's begin at 50 Berkeley Square. 50 Berkeley Square, the house where no one stays twice. I first heard about it from an old bookseller in Mayfair. A quiet man, glasses perched on the end of his nose, who spoke in a low, shaking voice as the rain tapped on the window. "You should never step inside number 50, he said. "Not unless you wish to meet what's waiting upstairs." At first, I thought it was one of those old London tales, stories made to keep curious wanderers away from crumbling houses. But then I learned that even in the 1800s, police refused to enter that building alone, and the locals would cross the street rather than walk past its door after dark. The house had been standing empty for decades, its windows shuttered, its bricks blackened by soot and time. But from the upper floor, people swore they'd seen a dim, flickering light and heard faint, choking sobs echoing through the night. Some say the ghost belongs to a young woman who threw herself from the window long ago, driven mad by cruelty or heartbreak. Others whisper it's something much older, something that doesn't belong to the human world at all. Years ago, 2 sailors from Portsmouth found themselves stranded in London one stormy night. Drunk and desperate for shelter, they broke into 50 Berkeley Square, laughing as they lit a lantern. "See," one of them said, "just another empty house." But as the light fell upon the walls, they noticed something strange. Deep scratches on the plaster as though someone had clawed at it for years. One of them, a man named Robert Warboys, decided he'd sleep in the haunted room upstairs. He laughed it off, said ghosts were for children's tales. The other sailor stayed below, curled up in a chair near the dying fire. At midnight, a loud scream tore through the silence, the kind of scream that freezes your blood mid-breath. The man downstairs grabbed his pistol and ran up the stairs, but when he opened the door, Robert was dead. His face twisted in terror, eyes wide and staring at something unseen. The room was empty, but the air still hummed with something cold and alive. No one knows what killed him. Some said he saw a woman, her face pale and sunken, her eyes hollow and wide like a corpse in water. Others said he saw no woman at all, only a dark, formless mass that crawled across the floor like a living shadow. Whatever it was, it left a mark so deep that the house stood vacant for nearly a century. Even the next owner, Lord Littleton, lasted only one night. He fired his gun at something in the dark, but by morning he refused to ever speak of what he saw. I went there once myself. The building still stands, quiet, old, its windows blind with dust. You can walk past it during the day, and it looks like any other townhouse in Mayfair. But if you stop for just a moment and listen, you'll hear the faintest tapping from the top floor window. A rhythm too slow to be the wind, too deliberate to be chance. Some nights a dim light still flickers behind the curtains, just enough to catch your eye. And for a second you could swear someone's there, watching you from the dark. There's a saying among Londoners, every city has ghosts, but in London the ghosts remember your name. And if you ever find yourself walking past Berkeley Square, especially when the rain falls soft and the streets are empty, don't look up at the window. Because if you do, you might see her, or it looking right back. And once you do, you'll never forget the feeling of those eyes watching from the dark. That was the first story, and London still has many more, places where the dead never left, and the living are just guests passing through. In the next story, we'll go deep underground, to the tunnels beneath Bank Station, where the sound of a woman's footsteps still echoes through the dark. You might think the underground is the safest place in London. Crowded, well lit, buzzing with commuters and the hum of the rails. But late at night, when the last train is gone and the tunnels fall into silence, you start to realize that the underground isn't quiet. It listens. I used to work the night shift at Bank Station, back when maintenance crews were still allowed to walk through the disused tunnels. There's something about that place. The air feels older than the city itself. One of the engineers, Thomas, told me a story on my first night. He said, if you ever hear footsteps on the central line after midnight, don't turn around. It's the Black Nun. I laughed at first, thinking it was a welcome prank. But the way he looked at me, pale, serious, eyes sunken, I knew he wasn't joking. The legend said she was once a woman named Sarah Whitehead. Her brother Philip worked at the Bank of England in the early 1800s. He was caught forging signatures and hanged for it. Sarah never knew. When she arrived to visit him one morning, they told her he'd been executed days earlier. They say she snapped right there in the lobby, screaming, crying, demanding to see him. And every day after that, she returned, dressed in black from head to toe, asking the same question. Have you seen my brother? For decades, she haunted the area around the bank, wandering aimlessly, her veil hiding her tears. And when she finally died, some say her spirit refused to leave, still searching, still waiting. That was the story. I didn't believe it. Not until the night I saw her. It was just past 1 in the morning. The platform lights flickered as I finished logging the final report. The air was still, too still. Then I heard it, heels clicking softly on the stone floor, slow, deliberate steps echoing down the empty corridor. Hello? I called out, expecting one of the cleaners. No answer. The footsteps stopped, then started again, closer, a rhythm. 1, 2, pause, 1, 2, like someone dragging a long skirt behind them. I turned the corner, and there she was. At first I thought it was just a shadow, but the shape was too distinct. A tall woman, dressed entirely in black, her face hidden beneath a veil. She stood by the ticket gate, her head slightly tilted. I froze. Excuse me. Before I could finish, she raised her head, and though I couldn't see her face clearly, I swear I felt her eyes meet mine. The air grew cold, not a breeze, but a weight pressing against my chest. Every instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't move. Then she spoke, a whisper thin as dust. Where is my brother? Her voice wasn't angry. It was broken, like someone who's asked the same question for centuries and never received an answer. I took a step back. Sarah, I whispered without thinking. The moment I said her name, she trembled, as if she'd heard it for the first time in years. She turned, slowly drifting toward the corridor that led deeper underground. Her feet didn't make a sound anymore, only the rustle of fabric. I followed. I don't know why. Curiosity, guilt, fear, all mixed together. The corridor grew darker the further we went. The hum of electricity faded, and soon I realized we were walking toward a section of tunnel that hadn't been used in decades. She stopped by a sealed iron door, one I'd never noticed before. Her hand hovered above the lock, trembling. Then she whispered again, "He's still waiting." The light above us flickered. For a second I saw her clearly. A pale, sorrowful face streaked with tears, eyes hollow but pleading. Then she was gone. No sound, no movement, only the echo of her last words. The next morning, when I told the supervisor, he went pale. He said there was an old sealed corridor beneath the bank, leading directly to the vaults where Philip Whitehead once worked. And yes, the door I described existed, but no one had a key. It hadn't been opened in over 100 years. Sometimes, when I ride the Central Line late at night, I still glance at the glass reflections in the window. Every so often I catch a glimpse of something. A black silhouette standing behind me on the platform, motionless, waiting. They say the Black Nun still walks the tunnels, forever searching for her brother. And if you ever hear the soft click of heels echoing in the silence, whatever you do, don't turn around. I've learned something from her, that grief doesn't always fade with death. Sometimes it roots itself in the places we love most and waits quietly for someone to remember. There's something strange about old theaters. Even when they're empty, they never feel silent. The air hums, as if every performance, every laugh, every cry ever spoken there has soaked into the walls. And in London, no theater carries more ghosts than Drury Lane. I've always loved that place. The red velvet seats, the faint smell of dust and perfume, the way the chandeliers sway ever so slightly, even when there's no wind. It's beautiful, and yet unsettling, because everyone who works there knows the same story, the story of the man in gray. When I first joined as a backstage hand, I thought the legend was just theater superstition. Every old building has one. But Drury Lane's ghost isn't like the others. He's not angry, he doesn't scream or throw objects. He simply appears. They say he walks the upper circle in daylight, a tall man in a powdered wig, a gray riding cloak draped over his shoulder, and a white frilled shirt beneath. He wears a sword at his hip, and his expression, calm yet terribly sad. Actors claim they've seen him before matinees, seated quietly in the corner of the stalls. And oddly enough, whenever he's seen, the show that follows always turns out to be a success. I used to laugh at that until the day I saw him myself. It was during rehearsal for a new production. I was checking the ropes above stage, the catwalk where the old lighting rigs hang like ribs of an ancient beast. The theater was empty except for a few of us technicians. From up there you can see everything. The stage, the aisles, the royal boxes. That's when I noticed him. At first I thought it was one of the actors in costume. A man standing by the side of the stalls, his posture straight, his head turned slightly as if listening to someone speak. The afternoon light from the stage hit his gray cloak, and for a second it shimmered like smoke. I shouted down, "We're closed today! Rehearsal's tomorrow." He didn't move, didn't even blink, just stood there, silent. Then he turned his head towards me, and I swear, I could see through him. Not transparent exactly, but blurred, like heat rising from asphalt. And his eyes were empty but knowing, like he'd seen centuries pass and was tired of watching. He lifted one gloved hand as if gesturing for silence, and then in the next blink he was gone. No door opened, no sound, just the quiet hum of the old theater lights. That night, one of the older stage managers pulled me aside. "You've seen him, haven't you?" I hesitated. The man in the cloak. He nodded. They all see him sooner or later. He told me the story, that during renovations in the 1840s, workers found a hidden room behind one of the walls in the upper circle. Inside was a skeleton, still wearing a gray cloak and a rusted sword. A knife was buried in his ribs. No one knows who he was. Some say he was a nobleman murdered by a jealous rival. Others believe he discovered a secret tryst, a betrayal, and met his end in silence behind those very walls. But ever since that day, his ghost has been seen wandering Drury Lane, not in anger, but in longing. Always alone, always searching for something lost to time. One evening, a few weeks later, I stayed behind after the show. The theater was empty, only the sound of rain tapping softly against the glass dome above. I sat in the last row, looking at the stage bathed in golden light. And then from the corner of my eye, movement. There he was again, walking down the aisle, each step echoing faintly on the wooden floorboards. He paused near the front row, looked up at the stage, and for the first time I saw a faint smile beneath his powdered wig. Not eerie, just wistful, as if he were remembering something. A performance, a love, a life he could never return to. The light flickered once, and when I looked again, he was gone. Only the scent of old smoke and rain remained. People say that ghosts are trapped by tragedy, bound to the places where they suffered or died. But I don't think that's true for him. I think the man in gray stayed because he loved this place too much to leave. There's something poetic about that. How even in death, he keeps watching over the stage, ensuring that every story told here still carries a piece of the past. And maybe that's what all ghosts really are. Not curses, but echoes of devotion that refuse to fade. Sometimes when I walk past Drury Lane late at night, I glance through the old glass doors. And just for a heartbeat, I imagine him standing there, cloak shimmering in the dim light, watching, waiting for the curtain to rise again. Because in the city of London, some stories never end. They simply change their audience. They say that ghosts are born from fear, but I don't believe that anymore. After all these stories, after hearing whispers from the walls of old asylums, seeing faces flicker in the dark corridors of theaters, and feeling the quiet weight of the past pressing against the present, I've come to think that ghosts are not monsters. They're memories, moments that refuse to fade, fragments of love, grief, and longing that the rain has carried through centuries. London has always been full of such echoes. In every raindrop that falls on its cobblestones, you can almost hear them. A laugh, a scream, a name once whispered. They blend into the rhythm of the city, becoming part of its eternal heartbeat. And maybe we keep telling these stories not because we're afraid of the dark, but because we want to understand it. Because somewhere in those shadows we see a reflection of ourselves, what we've lost and what we're still searching for. So tonight, as the rain falls outside your window, listen closely. Not every sound in the dark is meant to frighten you. Some are simply saying, I'm still here, and perhaps that's what makes London beautiful. It remembers.